I have a great privilege to welcome leading product manager expert, Roman Pichler. Good morning.
Morning, Eva, and nice to be with you.
I'm so happy. You know, I'm a big fan. I use your website with this landing page for so many wonderful resources. You can find the link to landing page of Roman Pichler's website on the Slack channel. And also you will find the link to the podcast. I didn't know you run a podcast, Roman.
Yeah, that's sort of, I started that, I think, at the beginning of last year, but it's been a little bit sort of, tried sort of, so yeah, great to hear that you like it.
I do.
I'm lost for words.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Roman Pichler, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Eva. So nice again to be with you. Lovely to have the opportunity to talk about the product owner role and share some tips for effectively applying the role. So I plan to talk about the role for roughly 30-35 minutes, and then I'm looking very much forward to your questions. The product owner role is sort of an interesting topic for me because, you know, reflecting on the history of Agile and Scrum, the role's been around for about a good 20 years. It's certainly been described in the book Agile Software Development with Scrum by Ken Schwaber and Mike Beadle, and that was published, I think, in 2002. So, you know, it's been around for quite a while, and it's been described and documented. It's been talked about, for quite some time, but still I find there's a significant amount of confusion around the role and how it should be best applied. So I thought I'd share my perspective on it and share my advice. Now, going back to the source, I just started to talk about Scrum as the framework in which the role originated in. What does the Scrum Guide say about the role of the product owner? Well, the latest version that was published about a year ago says that the product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product. Now, that sounds all right to me. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, maximizing the value of the product. But you know, if we reflect on what that really means, then it seems to me there's a central term here, and that is what a product is, or, you know, talks about the product owner, talks about maximizing the value of the product. Product owner also means that the individual somehow has to have some ownership of that product. So again, key question for me is what then is a product? So that's what I'd like to discuss with you initially. What's in a name? What's in a product? So here we have our product, and until very recently, the Scrum Guide and generally the Scrum framework did not offer a definition of what a product is. So I've provided mine, excuse me. So for me, a product is an asset, and when we talk about software products, digital products, it'd be software, it'd be code that creates value for a group of people, users, and possibly customers, and at the same time for the company creating and providing the product. It's a value creating vehicle, you could say. Products exist to deliver a benefit to users or solve a specific problem and generate some business benefits to the business, to the organization. Now, this might sound quite trivial, but I've found that many, if not most of the organizations I've worked with and I've worked for, in fact, didn't have a shared and agreed definition of what a product is, certainly not a digital product. And I remember running a workshop for product owners a few years back here in the UK for a geodata company. And based on the prep work I did and the conversations I had, I expected 5 to 8 people in the room, and I turn up and there are sort of good 20 people. So, you know, I thanked everyone for the interest, saying it's great to see so many of you, but this is a workshop for the product owners. And so, you know, people just say like, yeah, we know. So I say, well, surely you can't be all product owners. And people respond, oh, yes, we are. And so, you know, there was a significant amount of confusion what a product is, and hence there were too many people who thought they were product owners, but in fact weren't. And I'll come back to that story in a little while and sort of, you know, share my view on, you know, what kind of owners those individuals were. Now, if that's a product, so a piece of software that creates value for users in the business, and I should add largely on its own, is able to do so on its own, then what is a product owner? And so for me, in a nutshell, the product owner owns a product in its entirety. And again, I'll elaborate on this shortly, in its entirety, and is empowered to make not only the tactical decisions, but also the strategic ones. So tactical decisions are expressed in the product backlog by capturing items, say, as epics and user stories, and then refining them, breaking them down progressively. And that's important, of course. Attention to the details is important when we build digital products, but I think it's equally important to understand strategic aspects and be authorized to make the appropriate decisions. So deciding which users and customers the product should address, and which needs we want to select, what makes the product stand out or unique, and if the business goals are realistic or not. So those are decisions a product owner should also be empowered to take. And again, I'll elaborate on this in a little while. And then if that's the case, I find it's okay to ask people to take on responsibility or even accountability for achieving product success. But personally, I think it's not fair to ask someone to essentially manage a product backlog and work with the development team, and at the same time then hold the person accountable for achieving product success and maximizing the value of the product. So if we want the responsibility and accountability suggested by the Scrum framework, I think we need to make sure that people are sufficiently empowered. So talking about ownership and what it is kind of, scope of ownership and people not necessarily owning a product, reflecting on my work, I've come across sort of 6 different types of product owners. So it's not uncommon for me to meet someone and the person says to me, oh, I work as a product owner. And then after talking to the individual, finding out that maybe the person owns more than a product, or maybe the person owns less than a product. So what are those 6 types? The first type would be the Scrum product owner along the lines just sketched. And a Scrum product owner, just to remind you, owns a product in its entirety. So the entire product, top to bottom. And should own the strategic and the tactical decisions. But that's, of course, not the only type of ownership we encounter. Sometimes people own a product part, and if the individuals own an end-user facing product capability, a feature, then I would refer to the role of the individual as a feature owner. Now, being a feature owner can be very interesting. It can also be very challenging. Think about, say, an online retailer's website where you typically have a search and navigation capability function, the ability to search for products. Now, that can be quite a complex piece of software, but I would argue that it's probably not a product in its own right, because it's a step in the user journey. People come to the online retailer's website not just to look for a product, but to find the right product at the right price point and then purchase it. And equally, what the business really wants is not just understand what products people look for and possibly collect some initial user data, but really, they want people to make that purchase decision and go ahead with the financial transaction. So, for me, then search and navigation on an online retailer's website would be a feature rather than a product. And again, that might be quite a complex piece of software. It might be built by a dedicated team or by several dedicated teams, but there's a real difference between taking ownership and responsibility for a product and being responsible for the entire product. Scrum product owner needs different skills, needs to understand the market, needs to understand the user and customer needs, but also needs to understand the competition, needs to understand the underlying business model, has to be able maybe to create a financial forecast, has to be aware of the trends in the relevant market. And that's not necessarily the case so much for a feature owner. Feature owner needs to understand the users and customers certainly too, but then is much more focused on maximizing the value of that specific product part, that specific feature. Yeah. And then another type of owner that I quite frequently meet is somebody who owns an architecture building block, like a component or a service or a layer. So that might be, for instance, the data layer that allows information to be persisted and retrieved. And the story I told at the beginning from the geodata company where I ran this workshop with 20 odd product owners, it turned out that most of the individuals weren't Scrum product owners, didn't own a product in its entirety, but most of them were component owners. And so in this organization, the introduction of Scrum had started in development. And the development team said, well, we want to be Scrum teams now. Therefore, we not only need a Scrum master, but we need a product owner. Who could be our product owner? And so, they chose the most senior developer. And for a component owner, that makes a lot of sense. And again, being a component owner can be an interesting and challenging and demanding job. But a component owner needs different skills compared to a feature owner and certainly a Scrum product owner, in-depth technical knowledge, because a component owner will essentially try and define the interface of a service or a component, a piece of software, together with the users. The users are other development teams. What I'm trying to suggest here is really just to kind of call out the ownership, make that specific rather than calling everyone a product owner and then creating confusion because people, need different levels of authority or empowerment. People need have different responsibilities and people need different skills. Now, that's not the only type of ownership that we have, or I should say, we've got a Scrum product owner on here, and that's not the only type of product owner that we have. We also have the safe product owner, and as if, the whole product owner piece wasn't confusing enough and ambiguous enough, safe introduced another product owner type, the safe product owner, and I'll talk more about the difference between a Scrum product owner and safe product owner shortly. But just briefly, a safe product owner owns, that's at least my understanding, the tactical aspects of a product. So the product backlog or part of the product backlog and works with a development team. So it has partial ownership. So that'd be then the fourth type. And then we have two products, and we might want to consider to extract some shared assets into an internal technical platform. And treat that platform as a product in its own right. And if that's what we choose to do, then it may make sense to have a person owning that platform. And here we have a platform owner. Now, I have to say the platform owner really is a Scrum product owner. The only difference being that the platform owner here on this diagram owns a technical product, not an end user facing product. So the users of the platform are the development team members who build the products or the applications that sit on top of the platform. But otherwise, the platform owner is just like a Scrum product owner. Maybe less worried about monetization and the underlying business model. Doesn't need to understand the market and the end user needs, certainly not to the extent that a Scrum product owner does, but again, would own the platform in its entirety and be responsible for the success of the platform. Now we have three products. That makes a small product portfolio. So it might make sense to consider asking someone to manage or own this portfolio with three products. I mean, that's really questionable, admittedly. But if you have more products, if you maybe have 5, 6, 7, 8 products, then often it does make sense to have somebody who is responsible for maximizing the value those products create together. So I'm just to give you an example, I'm using Microsoft PowerPoint to share this slide with you. Obviously, PowerPoint is part of Microsoft Office, a suite, a collection of related products, productivity tools. And so, I don't know how Microsoft works, but I think it's likely that there is somebody at Microsoft who owns or manages Office. Certainly, if I was in charge of Microsoft, that's what I'd like to make sure. Yeah. So that then we have individual product owners, owners of Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, for instance, and then we have an Office owner. And again, the difference would be, as the Word owner, I'm responsible for maximizing the value of this specific product. And as the Office owner, the suite owner, I'm responsible for maximizing the value of the entire portfolio or the entire group, the suite. Yeah. So those are 6 types. And my intention was not to make anybody feel uncomfortable or bad, but just really to call out different types of ownership and talk a little bit about the different level of authority and responsibility that goes with it, and encourage you not just to call anybody who somehow helps manage a product owner, but really, be a little bit more discerning and distinguish between the types of ownership, and again, call those types out, make it clear. Now, as I said earlier, I'll talk a little bit more about the difference between the Scrum product owner and the Safe product owner, and that's what I'd like to do now. And in order to do so, I'm using a simplified version of Mike Cohn's planning onion. So my version here only looks at vision, strategy, and tactics. Vision is the inspirational overarching goal that we'd like to achieve, the positive change our product should bring about. So if an example I like to use, if I was to build a product that helps people understand how much they eat and what they eat and so forth, bringing awareness to their eating behaviors and improving those eating behaviors, then the vision could be healthy eating. And the strategy then says, how do we reach the vision and how do we achieve product success? And it might be by offering an app for middle-aged men like myself to help them reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So that might be part of my strategy statement. And then the tactics will be the detailed product decisions that I'd capture later in the product backlog. Then I need a dashboard screen, or the users need a dashboard screen, so they can understand their eating trends, they can understand better what they ate in the last few days and how calorie consumption has developed, for instance. Now, what has this to do with the Scrum product owner role? For me, a Scrum product owner really is responsible from the vision down to the tactics, or has, as I like to call it, full stack ownership. I just like that term for whatever reason. So it owns the whole stack in that sense. So is empowered not only to make tactical product decisions and prioritize the product backlog and refine items, but also make those strategic decisions. Again, what should be the value proposition? What should be the specific problem that the product addresses, or the specific benefits that it offers? Who are the users and customers? What makes the product special? What makes it stand out? And are the business goals realistic? And which business goals should we choose? Those are decisions that the product owner should really help bring about, and ultimately, lead the decision-making process. And if no consensus can be achieved, if product owner, stakeholders, and development team members can't agree on those decisions, then I think the product owner has to be empowered to have the final say. So it owns the product in its entirety, top to bottom. But that's not the case, at least that's my understanding, for a Safe product owner. And I'm not saying this not to be judgmental, but just to kind of call out the differences and bring some clarity to, what are the different roles that we're talking about, and what's the difference in terms of empowerment, but then also responsibility. So my understanding is that a Safe product owner is largely focused on the tactics, the tactical decisions, looks after the product backlog or a team backlog, and then works with one or more development teams. So it's a largely tactical, inward-facing role, and hence has partial ownership. And the Safe product owner is then complemented by a Safe product manager, and that Safe product manager is more strategic and more outward-facing. Now, I'm sometimes asked, where's the product manager in Scrum, and why isn't the Scrum product owner called product manager? And when you go back and look at the history of Scrum, you'll find that I think the first documented version of Scrum, that's in a paper presented at the Uppsala 95 conference, didn't talk about product ownership and didn't talk about a product owner. The paper talks about product management and talks about a product manager. So the original term in the Scrum framework was product manager. And then Ken Schwaber, who's been mainly responsible for coining the Scrum terms, changed the term later to product owner. And one of the reasons, as far as I know, is to underline the level of empowerment that product people need in a Scrum context. I mean, as you know, in an agile Scrum-based context, we value collaboration. We value bringing in users, customers, stakeholders, and we value closely working with the cross-functional development teams. And while that's great, when you have such a diverse and, potentially fairly large group of 15, 20 people, possibly more, it's not always easy to reach agreement. It's not always easy to get people to agree on something. And rather than being stuck and arguing forever, the Scrum product owner has to be empowered, or the product person in Scrum has to be then empowered to make a decision to keep the process moving forward. And that's, you know, where the term comes from, the owner term comes from. You know, so somebody who literally owns the product on behalf of the company and has that level of decision-making authority. Unfortunately, that's sort of often misunderstood. Yeah, the other thing I thought might be helpful is to briefly look at how the product owner role is positioned. I mentioned the SAFe product owner is more inward facing. What about the Scrum product owner? Well, for me, the Scrum product owner connects three groups of people, users and customers. The business stakeholders, the internal stakeholders from the various business units. So for commercial revenue generating product, that might be somebody from marketing, sales, support, service, maybe finance. And then one or more development teams. So here we have the Scrum product owner right at the center. And that means that the Scrum product owner, or as the Scrum product owner, you should have the opportunity to regularly meet and connect with at least selected users and customers. So the rule of thumb I like to suggest is that product owners in Scrum meet users and customers at least once a quarter, and you know, in carry out some form of market and user research. So for instance, interview users, talk to them, or observe how they use their products in the wild, in its target environment, or if it's not, you know, the product owner is looking after, then maybe a competitor offering. You know, but really getting that close and establishing a relationship and getting a close and intimate understanding of the users and their needs, in addition to hopefully collecting lots of usage data via analytics tools. So I think the tools are great, and quantitative data is great, and it's one of the real big advances I think we've seen in product management over the past 10-15 years, that we now have so much data available that helps us inform our decisions. I really do think that's great. But at the same time, I think that only shows a part of the picture, and in order to make the right product decisions and maximize the value of our products, I think it is really important to be able to empathize with users and customers. And you can't empathize with data, you can't empathize with figures, at least I can't. You know, so I think both is really important, meeting selected users and customers on a regular basis and talking to them and observing how they use a product, and then collecting data via an analytics tool. And hopefully those two pieces of information, those two information sources will then help you make the right decisions. Now, business stakeholders and development teams, those of you who work as product owners know that establishing effective connections and trustful relationships to those individuals is key. Why? Because as a Scrum product owner, I think we need to try and guide or lead the business stakeholders and development teams in order to achieve shared goals, in order to make progress towards the vision of the product, but also then to make progress towards a specific product goal, towards a specific measurable outcome that we'd like to achieve. For instance, acquiring initial user base and maybe helping people understand what their current eating behaviors are, to relate that back to my healthy eating example. And at the same time, neither neglect the business stakeholders nor the development teams, but kind of try and balance your time, or spread your time, in the right way between those different groups. And then I thought it might be nice to talk a little bit about what kind of leadership should product owners provide, and how does it differ from the other two Scrum roles. And as you probably know, there are three roles in Scrum: the Scrum product owner, the development team, or most recently also referred to as developers, and then we have the Scrum master. And ideally, those individuals should work together in a respectful and trustful manner. Otherwise, collaboration is hard to achieve, I find. So what about the type of leadership that Scrum product owners should provide? Well, for me, it's really around the product. And I've tried to call this out here because I often see Scrum product owners not only providing product leadership, but then also taking on some of the responsibilities of the development team and the Scrum master. But I'll get to that shortly. What does product leadership mean? It means ensuring that there is a shared overarching vision, that there is a product strategy that describes the approach to realizing the vision and achieving product success, and maybe a product roadmap that breaks that strategy down into more specific outcomes or benefits, and maybe states the product goals that you want to achieve in the coming 6 to 12 months. That'd be my suggestion. And then looks after the product backlog and prioritizes the product backlog, or helps prioritize the product backlog, and involves the stakeholders in the right way, collaborates with the stakeholders, guides the stakeholders. The development team, for me, should offer design and technology leadership, and that means owning, in a way, the solution, and making the detailed decisions about the solution, and deciding what the user experience design should be like, making all the technical decisions, and of course taking responsibility for testing and quality assurance in general, and self-organization or self-management. So being able to identify how much work can be pulled in a sprint and who works on what, deciding how people work together, and dealing with any issues that come up, dealing with disagreement and conflict, for instance. And then the Scrum Master, oh, sorry, no, before I talk about the Scrum Master, I should talk about shared responsibility. I'm getting ahead of myself here. too eager to talk about the Scrum Master, it seems. Shared responsibilities between the Scrum product owner and the development team. So user research, so that means reaching out to users and, for instance, observing users, talking to users. It might be part of a product demo, but you might also maybe want to visit users or schedule an online meeting with users separate from a demo. And I think it's really important to involve the development team members in the work, and giving them direct access to the users, so the individuals learn about the users and their needs. And that avoids that the Scrum product owner becomes a bottleneck. It shares then the knowledge, and it also helps people make the right design and technology decisions. So I find that really valuable. And as you probably know, the sprint goals should be selected jointly. There should be agreement between product owner and development team about the sprint goal. And then finally, product backlog refinement should be teamwork. It shouldn't just be done by the product owner, but the development team members should actively help identify product backlog items, but also then break them down, refine them, and turn high priority items into smaller detailed items that are ready for consumption, that are ready to be pulled into the sprint and to be transformed into a product increment. So finally, the Scrum Master, for me, provides process and people leadership. What does this mean? It means acting as a coach when it comes to agile processes and specific agile practices. And not only as a team coach, for the development team, but also somebody who can advise the product owner. And additionally, also, educate the stakeholders and the rest of the organization, if that's necessary. Helps with collaboration. So if there are any issues, any collaboration issues, say within the development team or between the Scrum product owner and the development team, but also I would say between the Scrum team. So you're seeing the Scrum team here. The three roles shown make up the Scrum team. So if there are collaboration issues between those individuals and the stakeholders, then that's something the Scrum Master might be able to help with too. And finally, organizational development and change. I think in the first Scrum book, which I've already mentioned, the Scrum Master role is called a change agent, or described as a change agent. So, usually in order to fully leverage an agile way of working and fully leverage the Scrum framework, an element of organizational development and change is necessary. And that might be to sharpen the understanding of the product owner role in the organization, or to ensure that product owners are adequately empowered, or it might be to adjust role descriptions, or learning and development programs, or employee selection criteria. It could be potentially pretty far-reaching, and the Scrum Master should look after that aspect as well. So together, those three roles really nicely complement each other. However, I find that quite often Scrum product owners don't have any Scrum Master, or the Scrum Master is not adequately available or not properly qualified. And then what happens is that Scrum product owners take on some of the Scrum Master responsibilities. It's natural, right? I mean, you want to care for the development team and want to help people maybe establish the right process, or maybe deal with friction and disagreement and conflict. And at the same time, you also have an interest in the sense that you rely on the development team to progress your product. And of course, you'd like to see the product being moved on and being developed as quickly as possible. But what it does is it either makes a challenging job. I mean, being a Scrum product owner is not easy usually. It makes a challenging job even more difficult. And that means that the role either then becomes unsustainable, and that's not great, because ultimately that'll have an impact on your health and your well-being, or you start neglecting some of your core responsibilities as the product owner. And often these responsibilities are the strategic ones around product strategy and discovery, because they're important but they're not urgent. So we think like, well, if I don't review the strategy and the roadmap now, and I don't do competitor research, and I don't reach out to users now, it's not that bad. I'll do it next month. And next month you're like, well, still everything's going okay. The KPIs look good. Maybe I can do it the following month. So you keep pushing it out. And that might work for a while, but then you sort of run the risk that eventually competitors will leapfrog you, and you're surprised and find yourself with the back against the wall, and that's not a good position to be in. So avoid taking on additional roles, at least on a continued basis as the Scrum product owner. Have the courage to say no. And honestly, my position is that it's not fair. It's not fair to ask people to take on a product owner role in Scrum if the individuals don't have a qualified Scrum Master who's sufficiently available as a partner at their side. Or similarly, if the development team is ill-staffed, lacks the right people, or people don't have the right skills. It's just not fair, because you really, makes it so difficult to succeed as the Scrum product owner. And you really do rely on having an effective development team at your side, and a strong Scrum Master as a partner at your side, I'd say. Finally, I thought I'd conclude by talking about what kind of skills might be helpful for Scrum product owners. And there are 3 groups of skills that I'd be looking for. The first one that I showed on the bottom right are the tactical skills. And I think these are the ones that Scrum product owners are often kind of familiar with, or maybe are often recognized as important product owner skills. They have to do with the product backlog, and with, say, getting feedback on product increments, and validating detailed product decisions, validating that the right functionality has been provided, or the right user interface design has been chosen. And the reason for that is that Scrum is a development framework, a framework that helps teams develop complex products. And so, it tends to focus more on tactical aspects, I would suggest. So these tactical skills are undoubtedly important, but they're not sufficient. I think they need to be complemented with the right strategic skills. So I think it's important to know a little bit about product lifecycle management, product discovery, product strategy, strategy creation and validation, market research, maybe a little bit of user research too, product road mapping, business model generation, financial forecasting. In order to be able then to make the right strategic decisions. And for me, the strategic decisions should guide the tactical decisions, and insights from the tactical work should then help advance and inform and correct the strategic decisions. So the two realms, the 2 levels, if you want, so they're connected. But the hard skills, the strategic skills and the tactical skills, they don't really come fully to life if you lack the right leadership skills. So I've done this exercise. I've been doing this exercise in my product owner workshops now for quite many years, where I ask people, if you were in charge now of hiring new Scrum product owners, what are the must-have skills that you'd be looking for? The skills that are really, really super important. And most of the skills people come up with in every single workshop are leadership skills. So these are people skills, interpersonal skills, skills around being able to empathize with people, or cultivating our ability to empathize. Being able to build trust, bringing awareness to your leadership style, having the courage to make decisions, and knowing how to make collaborative decisions, knowing how to maybe negotiate if that's necessary, being able to actively listen to people, really take in what people have to say, and at the same time speak in such a way that people can receive the message. And maybe things around ultimately safe leadership, making sure that you work at a sustainable pace, and making sure that you take time to reflect on your practice, how you work, and plan in time to develop and grow, and improve your craft as the product owner. So I'm not saying this to make anybody feel bad, but rather to bring awareness to the fact that being an effective Scrum product owner is not easy. There's a lot to it. We need a lot of different skills to be truly competent, and those skills can't be acquired within a few hours or a few days. So, attending a 2-day workshop is not just going to do the trick. It might be a first step on a learning journey, but I've been in product management now for about 20 years. I'm still learning, and it's just a rich profession. And yeah, it just takes time. It just takes time to pick up the necessary skills and then deepen those skills. For me, that's something rather beautiful. But for you, I'd like to sort of really encourage you to regularly reflect on your skills, maybe once a quarter. And you can use this little model that I've shown here in order to do that reflection, that analysis, and look into your tactical skills and say, like, how strong are my tactical skills? What about my strategic skills? What about my leadership or people skills? And then select the right improvement measures. You can even set yourself then some specific learning goals. You might even want to use a learning roadmap, possibly. So that brings me to the end of my talk. Again, to encourage you, be clear on what you own. If you work as a product owner, is it a product, is it a feature or component? Do you own the product top to bottom, or do you own maybe only the tactics? And then as I've tried to illustrate, for me, the product owner role, certainly the Scrum product owner, is a product management role and requires appropriate product management skills. And then I guess an encouragement to all of us that we don't get hung up too much about job titles and specific role names, but ultimately focus on the good that we do for the users and our businesses. So I hope this talk was a little bit helpful for you. As Evo's already kindly said, you can find more information on my website, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions now. I'll also be available in the Slack channel after my talk, after this session. So if you've got more questions, and feel also free to reach out to me via email if you like to sort of offer any feedback or have anything you'd like to get my input on. And finally, I've written a few books, and you might want to take a look at them and see if they help you develop your skills. So thank you again for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. I've read 2 of the books. I think I need to read the 3rd one, the newest one. And we have a lot of questions. One of the questions is connected with something you said about that the role of the product owner is difficult, and we need to the right improvement measures. So the question is how to measure good product owner. What are good KPIs for a Scrum product owner?
I don't know, quite honestly. So, I mean, KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. And originally, KPIs were developed as business metrics, and they've been then adopted for products. So when we talk about KPIs in a product setting, we mean what are some key metrics to understand how the product is doing, to understand if the product is creating the desired value for the users and the customers. And so a product KPI might be something like customer satisfaction, it might be something like engagement, or it might be something like monthly recurring revenue. So that would be 2 different types of KPIs. Now, when we think about the product owner's job, according to the Scrum framework, it's to maximize the value that the product creates. So, a product owner therefore will be doing a good job if the individual is able to, I'd say, meet the specific product goals. And I haven't had the time to talk about product goals, but for me, product goals, they are a recent addition to the Scrum framework, and I really like them. I've been working with product goals for a number of years, and you can find my take on product goals described in my latest book, How to Lead in Product Management. Another plug. And so a product goal is a specific goal, a longer term goal that the entire Scrum team works towards. And my suggestion, or an attempt to define good product owner performance is that, if the Scrum team and if the product is able to meet those goals and create the desired value on a regular basis, then the product owner must be doing a good job. But I think it's something that you always need to look at on a product by product basis. It really does depend what product it is that we're talking about. Is it a revenue generating product, a product that generates revenue directly, as like say Microsoft Office? Is it a product that is more supporting and supports a revenue generating product, like say the website that allows you to subscribe to Microsoft Office? Or is it an internal technical product that's really more focused on cost saving, productivity enhancements, like an internal software platform? And also, you know, what's really the ownership of the product owner? You know, what's the responsibility? I mean, product owners aren't usually CEOs of their products because they can't tell the stakeholders what to do. They don't have control over the stakeholders. So I honestly don't have a simple answer to the question. I think it's a very good question, but I think I don't have a simple right answer, you know, without looking at the specific context, I'm sorry to say.
We live in the complex world, so there's no place for simple answers. I totally agree. And when you elaborate about the different types of the owners, product owner, feature owner, component owners, we got a couple of questions. One is, please elaborate on the power of feature owner, what the person is empowered to.
Yeah, nice. Nice question. Another nice question. So for me, well, and I personally, I've always thought that, you know, Ken Schwaber's done a nice job at choosing the Scrum terms. For me, they've always felt fairly self-explanatory. So, you know, I'd say a feature owner owns a feature. And so it really should have then authority over a specific feature, specific product capability. So take search, for instance, and that would mean, you know, what the search feature looks like, what it feels like, how it is embedded in the rest of the product or the website, if it's a web-based product. And then the specific functionality, you know, that should be ultimately fall under the authority of the search owner, this feature owner. Of course, the feature owner has to work together with other feature owners to make sure that search and navigation really fit seamlessly into a user journey where somebody comes to the website and then searches for a product and then clicks on that product or selects that product and then looks at the product details and then hopefully makes a purchase decision, places that product in the basket and so forth. And also with the overarching product owner. But, you know, it would be, you know, the feature owner would have control over that feature and at the same time would be responsible that the feature works as expected, that, you know, the search results are meaningful. So just, you know, sort of personal story. My wife had a really hectic day yesterday. And so I said to her, and she said, oh, we need online shopping needs to be done. So I said to her, okay, look, I'll do the online shopping. And so, you know, I occasionally do some shopping and I occasionally do some online shopping, but to be fair, it's usually my wife who ends up doing it. So anyway, so I did the online shopping and, you know, and I'm not that super familiar with the program. And I did a search and it came up with really weird search results. So I thought, like,
did you buy it? Or just search it?
It's like, okay, I realize now I misspelled the name of the product, but it's pretty close. I mean, surely, you know, you should be able to recognize that and come up with more meaningful search results. So I had to redo the whole search, but it might have been, you know, if I'd been maybe a little bit more tired or fed up, that I just stopped at this point. And yeah, it would have just not then, you know, continued the user journey and continued and bought another product. So, you know, for me, somebody who owns that feature, you know, would be responsible for making sure that that feature really works well.
Thank you. That's a great story. And going forward with this feature owner and component owner, it was a question about the return of investment. Product owner is responsible for return of investment of maximizing value. If we have feature owner and component owner, how to focus on that, how to balance return of investment?
Yeah, another nice question. So the suggestion that the product owner is responsible for return on investment, I think, comes from the second Scrum book that Ken Schwaber wrote, Agile Project Management with Scrum, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong on this, I'd have to double check, but, you know, that was suggested a while back. But, you know, the issue with return on investment is that it's a financial metric, not necessarily the only financial metric you want to use, not necessarily the right one. The second issue with return on investment is that it's comparatively easy to determine with revenue generating products. It's much harder to determine with other types of products. And even with a commercial revenue generating product, you know, return on investment, really looking at return on investment and using that metric only makes sense once the product's entered the growth stage and once you've achieved product market fit. So what I'm saying is it's not necessarily the right metric to use. And so I'd be careful, if, if you use the metric and it works for you, obviously that's great. There's no reason why you shouldn't use it, but don't feel obliged to use return on investment as the metric to determine if the product owner is doing a good job. It might be the wrong metric, So, it goes back to, I guess, the first question, saying in order to understand if a product owner is doing a good job or a feature owner is doing a good job, we have to understand what are the specific, ultimately agreed goals that the individual is working towards. And I suggested with the product owner, it might be the product goals that have been agreed upon and maybe put on a product roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months. With a feature owner, it would be then a contribution to those product goals. And how you break that down in detail, again, is probably something you need to try and figure out collaboratively for a given product. Again, I unfortunately, I don't have like an answer or a formula that I can give you and say like, this is the way to do it. I'm the person who comes up with the models, not the person who always applies them.
This is usually the big question. What is the added value from a feature, from the component, from the whole product? What is that?
Yeah, I think so. For me, it's always helpful when we talk about value to look at things, start with the big picture and look at things from a user perspective. It really, so, particularly my experience working with larger organizations is that larger organizations often have so many products, they have so many components, they have so many features, they have so many teams, that it becomes a little bit myopic. It becomes a little bit like, because we have a team and that team builds software, that software somehow must be meaningful and it might even be a product. And so then, it's helpful to recognize that and challenge that and say like, let's look at all our software assets from the outside in. Let's start by looking at the revenue generating products, and then let's look at the digital assets that support those revenue generating products. And that way really identify what is a product and what isn't a product. It really is crucial in my mind to get that right. And once you understand what a product is and you understand what value that product creates, you can then say, okay, given that is the value the product should create, what does it mean for the product owner? What does it tell us about how we can judge if a product owner is doing a good job or not? And what does that mean for a specific feature owner? Yeah. But then you kind of approach things not only from the outside in, but top down, and ultimately that's related to building something like an overarching product strategy first that clearly describes the user needs, the value that the product should create for the users, and the business goals, the business benefits the product should achieve, and derives then specific product goals, and then says, okay, what's the product owner's contribution to meeting those product goals, and what's a feature owner's contribution to meeting those product goals. I think if you approach the question with like, oh my God, I'm owning this piece of software. Now, how do you judge? How can I be judged? Or how do I know that I'm doing a good job? It's like, it can be very challenging, So again, try and approach it outside in and top down. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Totally agree. Those are basic questions and too often not answered. What's the value? What's my product even? And connected with that is the question in your consultancy, which one of these roles you presented you think is misunderstood in many places?
So I think a common, in a way, mistake I see people make is to call anybody who works on anybody who has some product management responsibilities and helps manage a product owner in an agile context. And I'm guilty of that myself. So I just the other day I looked at the scaling advice I gave in my book Agile Product Management with Scrum, and it has a chief product owner at the top and then a hierarchy of product owners underneath. These days I wouldn't call the roles underneath the chief product owners anymore. I would call them feature and component owners. And I changed the chief product owner to product owner, because I think there should only be one product owner per product. And then, in order to scale up, you have to share responsibility. And, you might do this by using feature owners and maybe a few component owners, or you might do this by going down the safe route and having somebody who's got more tacticals and somebody who's got more strategic responsibilities. But yeah, just calling out what people actually own, and that creates transparency, and it makes it clearer why people need a certain level of empowerment and decision-making authority, and also then, you know, what the likely responsibility of the individuals is.
Thank you for sharing that. It's great to hear that your teaching involves, as the word involves also. And one of the challenging questions connected with the safe product owner role, I must say a lot of emotions with this role, we can see on the Slack, that there is another role in safe. It's product manager. He's higher in hierarchy, in a structure. So why is that? Because being owner sounds like a greater responsibility than being product manager. Could you please comment on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, I hopefully I didn't give anybody the impression that I don't know, I was, well, hopefully I wasn't too judgmental towards SAFe, and it certainly wasn't my intention to bash the framework. It's a scaling framework. It's one of the popular scaling frameworks that are out there. But, you know, when I look, for me personally, I think it's unfortunate that SAFe chose the term product owner in order to describe a tactical product management role. And ultimately, I think it's a misunderstanding of the Scrum product owner, role. But then that's not only kind of a misunderstanding by the people who created SAFe. I think it's an unfortunate general misunderstanding in the industry. Quite often the Scrum product owner role is not properly understood, and people think, oh yeah, that's sort of a combination between a team lead and a business analyst who also does a little bit of project management, right? That's a product owner. Great. We've got these people. Yeah. Which is like, oh, no, not quite. Not quite.
Yeah. So what is the difference? Who is product owner and who is product manager, in your opinion? Is it the same?
Well, for me, it's the same. I've always thought of the Scrum product owner as an agile product manager. And the first product owners, essentially, I worked with were product managers. But, you know, I've worked with organizations where the product managers couldn't wait to become these hip agile product owners. And I've worked with organizations where the product owners couldn't wait to grow up and become real product people and become product managers, so they have some real decision-making power and they can take charge of the product strategy, no longer stuck down in the weeds and dealing with those horrible user stories. So I tend to advise my clients just to choose one term or the other. And, you know, I don't really mind if people talk about a product manager. I don't have anything against the product manager role, as long as it's properly defined and properly understood. But choose one. You know, either you have a product manager or you have a product owner. If you have both, I think it easily creates a lot of confusion. Yeah,
absolutely. Totally agree. You mentioned a specific situation in specific companies, and we have a question regarding a structure, like there is a company, mother company, business company, and IT company, and there is Proxy PO in IT company, which is the only bridge junction with business company. Could you please give any hints how to cooperate in this situation?
Yeah, nice. That reminds me of a client I worked with a while back, and it was very, very telling. You sort of arrive at reception, and there were, you know, from reception, you could turn left and you could turn right. And these were two different buildings. You'd turn left and you'd go to all the business functions. All the business people would be on the left. You turn right and it was all IT.
It's good that not the down and up.
Yeah, and there were some clues, right? So you'd turn left, you'd go to the business people, and the coffee shop that they have, you know, was Starbucks. And then you turn right, you go to the techies, to the nerds, and you'd get Costa Coffee. Now, Costa Coffee, I think, is a UK-specific coffee chain, and they do nice coffee, but it's maybe not perceived quite as upmarket and not maybe quite as good as Starbucks. so it was. I thought it was really interesting that they sort of really, literally, physically removed the business functions and the IT functions as much as it was possible, and also kind of, as I said, had these clues: who was valued more by the business and who was valued less. So that's a real issue, and one of the things that Scrum, that's at least my understanding of the intention, one of the intentions behind the Scrum product owner role, is to bring technology and bring business together. I showed this Venn diagram with, the users, customers, and then the business stakeholders and the development teams. And in a way, the product owner should act as a glue, as a bridge, and really connect those individuals. And the idea, I think, is that innovation is facilitated. Innovation happens when you bring the right people together, when you bring people together with a business perspective and a technology perspective. Certainly that can be helpful in order to create something new. Now, if you have a proxy product owner, what you've essentially done is you've split the product owner role. And sometimes, that's simply done to facilitate a remote work and have a proxy product owner who's then close to a remote team and can answer questions quickly. And then have an off-site product owner, say, I don't know, you have the product owner in Poland, and you have the proxy product owner here in the UK. And then, the product owner in Poland is the real product owner. But, again, that splits the product owner role, and often the real product owner then has the strategic decisions, and the proxy product owner makes the tactical decisions. So you end up a little bit like a version of the SAFe model, you could say. And, if that's necessary to get going, if that's a temporary solution, that's okay for me, but if it becomes a permanent solution, I don't think it's healthy. So I think it's worthwhile looking at what can you do to directly connect the IT teams, maybe the offshore or remote IT teams, with the product owners. What can you do to bring them together? And I mean, these days, with all the online collaboration tools that we have, I think, that should surely be possible. I mean, I'd question the need for a proxy product owner and ask, why is it necessary that you have a proxy product owner? And maybe it's then around product owner availability or product owner qualification. But if those are the issues, then you need to tackle them, and not kind of accommodate, in a way, impediments by putting a proxy product owner in place.
I would like to nail the other question, which is connected with the dimension, like across the product owner responsibility, not necessarily IT proxy product owner and business proxy product owner, but product owners split it into smaller chunks. Do you think this is anti-pattern to have proxy product owners for the chunks of the...
Yeah, generally speaking, I think a proxy product owner is an anti-pattern, and it's sort of a mistake in a way that people make when applying the product owner role. And there are always good reasons. I mean, again, it might be because to accommodate remote working, it might be an issue around empowerment, it might be an issue around availability. I once worked with a client where the product owner was one of the senior managers, and it made sense for that specific product because it was a new product development effort and was a strategic product, really very important product for the company. But the individual just didn't have the necessary time and couldn't really kind of free up enough time and didn't have the focus. And so, essentially the team ended up installing a proxy product owner, sort of the business analyst essentially stepped into that role. But, it wasn't fruitful at all. It wasn't helpful at all at the end of the day, and caused a lot of issues further down the line. And so the real problem was a lack of availability of the real product owner. That's what the team should have tackled rather than installing a proxy product owner. Yeah. So again, whenever you have a proxy product owner, whenever you split product ownership, ask yourself, is that a good idea? Is it really necessary? And is it really helpful? Or are we kind of just masking an underlying problem rather than tackling it, rather than addressing it?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we exhausted our time box. So the final question, I hope, a holy grail. Have you seen a real product owner with responsibility, maximizing value of his product in reality? Is it possible?
Yes, it is. So fortunately, I do meet real product owners from time to time. No, it honestly, I mean, one of the things I've always liked about the Scrum framework that it is not, it wasn't created by academics, right? It's not based on people theorizing and coming up with a theory, coming up with a vague model, and then saying like, now let's show if that model works. I mean, the people who created Scrum, struggled for years, to find a sustainable, a good and creative way to build complex digital products. So yes, there are real product owners out there. I think for many product owners, they face two challenges. One challenge is working with an organization that doesn't necessarily fully understand and appreciate what product management is and has a low product management maturity. And that's the case for quite a few industries. You think about banking and insurance type companies, think about travel and tourism, think about retailers, think about media companies. All those businesses traditionally don't have a product management group, don't have a product management function. So that's new to them. And it's new to have people who own assets and should be empowered to make the necessary decisions and also to organize around those products and be product led. I mean, often that's really new to those businesses as well. And then the second challenge many product owners face is the agile aspect, that companies are still fairly new to an agile way of working. That's something still that hasn't been fully established. So comparatively low product management maturity coupled with a comparatively low agile maturity just makes it super hard to be an effective product owner. But if that's the situation you're in, then hopefully with a bit of perseverance and patience, things will improve over time. And if not, well, that's something to be reflected upon, I guess.
We will. Thank you very much. You kindly agreed to be available for a short time in dedicated channel for your talk. I copied the link to the channel in the main pink room. So please follow the Roman and ask more questions if you have any. Thank you so much. That was a great pleasure.
Thank you. No, pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me. And I hope it was a little bit useful for everybody watching.